Demo as far as construction drawings using VectorWorks for just one flat from streetcar. And then I'll let you back at your computers. A couple of quick little notes though is I have posted in Cougar View some examples of streetcar construction drawings. One is for a curved step, one is for flat A, and one is for wall K. And then I've also posted a document which is basically a self-evaluation and what grade I would give these three drawings. Sort of like a rubric. It's not quite like a rubric. It doesn't say if it has this, this, and this, it gets this. It does list, however, what it includes that earns the grade that it earns and what it's missing that would have earned it a higher grade. Okay, so there are some examples there. The handout that I've given you is a list of things in not a complete order, but it's in a pretty good order. And it shows this list that I gave you has methodology behind the use of the program, use of classes, layers. We've done all these things, right? It does not include anything we haven't done yet on this list. We've done an awful lot. So as you're looking at your drawing and you're looking at your document, please go ahead and look at this list and maybe treat it or create a checklist out of it. Use of classes, use of layers, save view, sheet layers, various tools. If you have one view and it's one object, I'm not worried about you having 27 different layers. If it's something that pertains to different layers, let's say you're using your base template file that we've created of your theater, and you'll notice that whenever I open an example file, usually I'm opening one of those template files, and then I just build upon it and I turn off all those additional layers. If you're drawing construction drawings for streetcar, those are likely going to be within the streetcar file you've already started, and so you already have your base theater there. You've got your layers that have theater, architecture, your stage, your line set schedules, and all those other layers are likely already there, just turned off for your current project. So we're using these as all building blocks. Classes, I'm going to do a little bit of a class demonstration here as far as the classes I would use in this construction drawing. And as you can see here, we have a bunch of design layers that are turned off. The only one I have on here is construction drawing demo, and all the other ones are existing that I've used before in the demos. It's the same demo file that I've used all along. Further down on this list, well, I can let you look at the list, but scenic ground plans, it lists everything that we would have in our scenic ground plans. There is a note down here, down at the bottom. I don't know which side I gave you. I didn't number the sides, but it says all drawings. So all drawings likely want to have a border, a title block used properly, and what I mean by that is including the correct information, like your name, the show name or the project name, the scale, the date, all that information that we would include in a title block. Line weights and line types. Center line should always be long dash, short dash. Line types for other things. The heaviest lines on a light plot, for example, the heaviest lines are assigned to the lighting units, save for the architecture of the room, because that's an immovable object. So using the heaviest lines for the walls of the theater might be appropriate, but for the most part the lighting units are the most important thing. Your sheet layout. Frugal use of sheet space is important. Use the largest scale you can. We've chit-chatted about that. We want to have half-inch is preferred, quarter-inch if the drawing is huge, but don't have a small scale leaving a lot of white space on the paper. Use the biggest scale you can fit on your paper. Notations, item labels, viewport names, drawing titles. There's a big one. It really should be higher on the list. Information, info is correct. If it's just outright incorrect info on your drawing, then there's a fundamental, it's not right. So your information that you contain on your drawing should be correct. Hatching as needed and shading as needed. Your architecture wall should be hatched. And then we have some things for smaller drawings. And then I made a small list of construction drawing items, but the all drawing stuff should still have those items listed. They're there. So treat it like a checklist. So doing a construction drawing, I have here a front view of this particular wall in VectorWorks. Looking at this wall, there's the wall. It's just a 3D basic shape. It's from the first day I did the outline and then I extruded it to whatever size I extruded it to, probably 3 inches to represent a Hollywood flat. So here we're back to a front view, which is how we're going to draw it. I'm going to make a change. Now for the fundamental covering, when we cover these flats, what are we covering it with? A little construction review.
What's it called? Luan?
Luan. Yes. So we're going to cover it with a hard-covered quarter-inch material. In this particular case, the sample drawing that I posted online is actually quarter-inch plywood because this was a Larry McDonald production, and he likes to have his actors run into the walls. So this was constructed with a harder surface, and that you'll see in the tech drawing that's posted online. But that's fine. Luan is great. How thick is Luan?
Not thick.
Right.
It's
It's quarter, I mean it's available in eighth, but we usually use quarter because eighth is hard to get. So this thickness of this object is a little bit wide for what we're doing, but like I said, this is just a quick. This was just the quick outline that we used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this drawing and I'm going to change this. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm just going to hit Control D for duplicate, and I'm going to change my depth. You can see here that we have a width, a depth, and a height of this solid subtraction. And we're going to see if this works. I'm going to change the depth. Now this is the duplicate because I duplicated it and it's still selected. I'm going to change this to 0.25 or a quarter of an inch and hit return. And now we'll take a quick look at it from the side. And now we can see if we zoom in on it that we've got two. We've got this one that's still highlighted and is in the middle, and we've got the solid one that I did originally that was 2 3/4. So this has now become my plywood cover. I'm going to move it to the front of the unit, just like that. We'll take another look at it from a different angle. And there you can see the glowing one is the quarter-inch cover now made out of Luan. There's our cover. Now Luan comes in 4 foot by 8 foot sheets, so it's not quite going to work perfectly. We're going to have to figure out how to do that. But for this step, having the quarter-inch cover works really, really well. I go back to a front view of my object. Now this particular quarter-inch cover now, I want to change, instead of it being in the class Tracing for Demo, which was the class I created during that day that I traced it for you, I'm going to change it to a class that I already have predefined here under Flats Facing, because this is the facing of my flat. So I'm going to move it to the Flats Facing class. And now that I've moved it to the Flats Facing class, it should pick up the attribute that is contained in that class. And if I hit Fast VectorWorks, it's going to take on the shading that the class is assigned. Do you remember when I did a demo, I can do it again, of assigning a class a shade or a texture? Should I show it to you real quick?
Yes.
Okay. I double click up here on the navigation palette to bring up my class editing window. And in my classes I have the flats. Here's the class that's labeled Flats Facing. I right click and I hit Edit. And here's where I have used a creation for whatever I put into that class. I've chosen a pattern, and I've chosen whatever this pattern is, which is this very tight dot pattern. And whatever I put into that class will adopt these attributes.
Is that the same for like textures?
Yes. Whatever I assign here, whatever I put into there will adopt whatever these settings are. Okay. So in this case, I've made it into these little dots. Now taking a look at here, framing, the facing was the little dots. The framing, which I'm about to do next, is a different pattern, and that's these little diagonal lines. It's a hatch pattern. So it's just a different pattern. So when I draw the thing later on, I'll be able to tell the difference between the two, and when we render them. So now in my front, come back, in my front view, I have, I still have my thing selected. I'm going to go in my navigation palette. I'm in my construction drawing demo, and the class that this object is currently in, object info, tells me Flats Facing. Well, now that I have my Flats Facing, the facing for the flat, this other 3D object, which is sitting in class Tracing for Demo, I'm going to turn it off because I don't need it now. I've used it, I don't need it, I don't want to get rid of it, but I'm just going to turn it off. So I'm going to do that by turning off the class Tracing for Demo, which was the one I used several weeks ago when I did that demo for you. I'll turn that off. I'll tell it to go ahead and render. And now I just have the facing sitting here. Go back into wireframe. So there's just a 1/4 inch wide facing, because I've turned the class off that had the other one. Okay, so there's just the facing with no framing at all. Now if I take a front view of this and I want to add some framing, I'm going to take, what tools might be handy to draw 1x3 on edge? Double line tool. Let's use the double line tool, and I'm going to set the separation to be 3/4 of an inch, which is already set to. And I have this The red dots are at the bottom, so I'm going to use those to start my drawing. And I'm going to start in the lower left corner of my flat. There's a front view. When we're doing construction drawings, we're either doing front view or rear view. The beauty about using the program is we can do a front view tracing and then just turn it around to look at the back later. So I start drawing my double lines. Do this one all the way across from corner to corner, and I click. Now hopefully this has created a polygon. I'm going to check my settings. There's this setting bar right here, the little button, double line preferences, and it does say, in fact, create polygons. And that's what I want, with a separation of 3/4 of an inch, because a 1x3 is 3/4 of an inch by 2.5. So I now have my 3/4 of an inch line down here, and if I zoom in on it, it's a 3/4 inch by whatever length it is polygon. The only catch is that it's flat. And in fact, since it's flat, it doesn't move around with my drawing because I'm in screen plane. To review, what plane will we need to be to make a flat object rotate along with everything else? Layer plane, excellent. So let me change to layer plane for the rest of the duration of this drawing. And let me change this object, because the object was drawn in screen plane, so it still lives in screen plane. I'll change it to layer plane, and pop, it just moved. Okay, it's still flat on the floor, which presents me with a problem, because now it's flat on the floor, it's shifted, so that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. So I'm going to delete it and draw it again one more time, because that's easier than trying to shift it around and change it. So double line tool, I'm in layer plane now. Click on the bottom left corner. I don't know if I've shown you or actually specifically mentioned the beautiful loop tool, but have you guys heard of what a jeweler's loop is? It's a little magnifying glass a jeweler puts in their eye to look at jewelry, to look at a diamond. It's called a loop. And so the loop tool in my keyboard is the Z key, and I can do a close-up of that corner so I can make sure to hit that corner spot like I'd like to. And I'm going to loop to the other side. Even though it's snapping to there, I'm going to make sure that I can see it properly. Loop that side. Now there's my line again. And what do we need to do to make it into an actual 1x3 instead of just the 3/4 inch rectangle? Okay, so we're going to extrude it to 2.5 to 2.5. Now if I look at it from another angle, there's my board sitting on the floor. The only problem is that the rest of my flat is nowhere near it. The facing's all the way back there. Well, when I'm drawing these lines, it's drawing it on this y, x, and probably my z coordinate, or my x, y coordinate is putting it at 0. So to make my life a little bit easier for the moment, I'm going to move the facing of the flat to the front of my board.
Could you also set a working plane off the base?
I could change the working plane, but this is much faster and easier. And provided that when I'm finished with this, I move it back in place on my ground plan, it doesn't matter. You know, whatever's fastest and easiest, and as long as you're using the program's powers to do what you're doing. But it will make my life easier because now that they're all at 0, 0, as I rotate, I don't have to center the screen anymore because now it's all based upon 0 on the 3 different planes. So there's my bottom board. So now that I have the bottom board established, I'm just going to start filling in other boards for the framing. Now some of you have construction experience and some of you don't have the same construction experience. But basically, if you're framing out your parts, okay, there's a frame there. We're going to want a vertical frame on either side of the window. I'm not so worried about your particular method of framing this puppy, as long as it's clear of what you want. Okay, so I go down there, I pull down, and I'm going to draw the side frame member of this window all the way up to the top. There it is. And this side I'm going to do the same thing, but I have to switch my choice, because if I, where it starts from, the little red dots, okay, the control line mode, if I start here at the bottom of this window, and I pull down to grab the bottom of the frame, to meet the bottom of the frame, let's say I go straight down here, if I click here and draw up, now I'm putting the framing inside the window. Okay. So I need to change that so that it puts the framing on the other side of my starting line by clicking my little red dotted thing here. And now it's on the outside of the window. And I'll go all the way up to the top. Click, there they are. Questions as I'm going along?
This is the next thing we're turning in?
Construction drawing for streetcar.
Okay.
Yes.
So we should erase all the walls?
Is that due Monday?
I think so. Yeah. This is a review. Now keep in mind, this is drawing the same thing as a flat. So we're building upon the skill, we're just now following a specific shape for a flat. Okay? Okay. So it's not a totally new assignment. but it's basically framing a construction, just so you're following and doing a Hollywood flat, because we haven't done any Hollywood flats yet, or followed a framing of this. And when you see my example that I posted online, you'll see the actual framing of this thing, which you're welcome to copy as you see fit. So we've got these framing pieces that I'm just throwing together, and there we go. And considering that this week, particular week, just the plans you may have had are likely changing because of recent events, if we want to extend this until next Wednesday, I'm happy to do that. So I've added some framing members. Here's the next step. Usually we're going to have a framing member, let's say, every 18 to 24 inches. So I'm going to stick a piece of wood right down here at the bottom to fill in the space between these two. We need some cross members. So I'm going to stick a piece of 1x3 right down here, just this length. Boom, there it is. Do you see it there? Is it glowing well enough behind my head to see it? Now I'm going to move it. Command M, X is to the left and right, Y is up. I'm going to move it up 18 inches. Oh, it's gone. Okay, there it is. 18 inches up. Control D to duplicate, Control M to move, return. Control D, Control M, return. Control D, Control M, return. Now look what's going to happen. Okay, I've made a few of them. And if they're the same size, it's really much, much faster than trying to drag it into place. If you just duplicate, move, and whenever you use the move tool, it retains what was in the last time you used it. Return, and return, return. So now we've got several that are going up and down. We can take one of these over, and I'll duplicate, move it over to this side, zoom in on this. Nope. Grab it, move it over to next to this framing member here. Zoom out a little bit. And I need to stretch it so it's a little bit longer so it reaches the end. So I'm just going to grab it. Now I have not extruded this yet. That's why it's so easy to manipulate and change its size. There we go. And now I can also duplicate that and move it. And it moves up, although it's stretching past the crooked edge, so I have to edit that. Okay. I'm not going to edit that now because it'll just take more time. But that's basically how we're putting together our flat. What I do need to do is, I've extruded only the bottom one, yes? I think, from memory? Okay. What I need to do is I need to extrude the rest of them. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to select all. I'm going to press Shift to deselect the framing, I'm sorry, the facing, thank you, and I'm going to deselect this bottom one because it's already extruded. Now I have 17 objects that are not extruded. Hit Control E and extrude. Now they're all extruded. The catch is they're all extruded, and when you extrude a group of objects together, it automatically groups them. So I can't edit just one until I ungroup. I can right-click to ungroup. Sorry, I got to go. I can also hit Command or Control U to ungroup, or under Modify, I do ungroup. And now I have a whole bunch of individual items. But all these individual items are individual boards in the framing of this flat. So that's how we do the framing of the flat. There's a little bit more involved in getting the other parts done. But there you have the basic framing of the flat and how you lay it out.
Exactly where they all go.
I'm sorry, what?
If we don't know exactly where all the pieces should fall, we just build it the way we think it should.
Yes.
Yes.
If you don't know where they go, you can put them where you want. However, all the framing pieces, like these vertical ones, should be at least evenly spaced.
Yeah.
Don't just have a willy-nilly, place. There has to be a method to your madness. And I'll tell you why. It means that you only have to dimension fewer items. Because if they're all over the place, you have to dimension each and every one. If they're all typical dimensions, you can dimension one and then say repeat, as long as it's clear. Okay.
For over here on the side, because I know there are several walls in the streetcar set that had the cut-off edge, are we just going to make the bracing shorter? We just have to go to the end?
On this one, what I would do for this diagonal, you can look at the one that I've made, because I actually used this particular one as an example. But here's your cross bracing. There's the piece.
Okay.
And then the carpenter in the shop would attack it with a jigsaw. Right, after they put the bracing on. Okay. Did you print it out? Is that the one that I did? Does it look like sort of like this?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
Cool.
all we do is just the bracing just goes to the, it just got a 45-degree cut.
Take a look at the example that I gave you
Okay.
online.
So it is like steps.
Okay. Okay, because it's one of the examples. Okay, if you do this one, I'm happy. Okay, provided that you're using all the steps. Now let me throw this in at you. What I have not done yet is I haven't selected them and put the framing into the framing class. They're all sitting in the none class right now. So for me to select everything, I'm just going to select everything and then deselect the face. Now I'm going to stick it over here and I'm going to change it into my flats framing class. Do you want the selected objects to use the graphic attributes of the new class? Yes, because this will then take the attributes from the class itself. So now let's take a look at this under OpenGL. We'll do the OpenGL rendering, take a look at what it looks like. Now you can't see the framing because the framing's in the back. So if now I change my view, there's the framing. This is a rear view. It has not taken on the attributes because it's not rendered. So let me render it and we'll take a look at what happens. Let me try a different render. I've got something set up not quite right to get the cross-hatching, but that's what that looks like rendered, and it gives me details, you know, how it's joined, so I can tell which board is traveling where, and I'll fix that and then show you what I did to fix it. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Rendering takes a little while, as you all know. Okay, so the next step in our process is to take this and draw a rectangle around it. And what am I about to make?
Viewport.
Yes. Oops. There we go. Click. Okay. I take it. View. Create viewport. Okay. Viewport. Wall K. Front view. I'm going to select all that and just copy it into the next thing. And then we're going to create it on a new sheet layer. And this is going to be, we'll say walls -1, and we'll call this wall K. Now it doesn't say front view, because the whole sheet is going to be for wall K. Okay. And I'm going to change the DPI to 300 for printing. 72 is fine for screen resolution. Okay. And there's my wall K. Now the paper size on this particular drawing is a D size. So I move this up here, and then I can take it and I can duplicate it, and I can move it over, and I can change its view to back view. There's the rear view. And then on the one on this side, since it's a front view, I can render it to hidden line perhaps. And then I have to update the viewport, so it does that. And now the front, I mean, it's just solid from the front. But from the back, I see all the framing. And the next thing we need to do is label this one, give this one a name and annotations. We need to call it that it is the front view, so we give ourselves a label, front, whoa, way too big, view, and we need to change the size so it fits properly, and make some adjustments and that sort of thing. Okay? Now the other thing that you can do to make your lives a little bit easier and faster is if I take this box here that I have and change my text to what I want, say 12 point, and I actually have in my attributes palette, let me see if I have that in my attributes palette. I do. I have an attribute already pre-made. Whenever you save a new text style, it saves over here in the attributes palette. Notes 12 point in Times New Roman. So I double click on that and it changes my text style. So that's real quick. Now if I had copied this viewport instead, let's copy this one, let's duplicate that, move it down, oops. Move down, okay. It says front over here, so all I have to do is go into the viewport and edit front and change it to whatever I want. Okay. Back, and then I can edit. Now I don't have to set up a new text or anything. It's already set up. I just have to change the view so it matches the rear view, wireframe, and back. So now it matches the label, and I have a setting turned on that automatically flips the text. Otherwise, it would have spelled it backwards. Okay. So I don't have to worry about redoing the text style. What would be next on this? Adding dimensions, that's right. Okay. So we have to go in and do our dimensions as needed. We want an overall height, and so on. That's way too big. So with that dimension selected, I go back and I double click on my style, and it changes the dimension style. Now, you have the option in your dimension styles up here. When you're in the dimension tool, you can choose your dimension style, and it will follow whatever that dimension style is whenever you're doing new things. Okay? So you don't have to edit the size later. You can also go back later and select all the dimensions and give it a new text, and it'll change them all. I have to give it a border. The whole sheet is a border. But one of your files should have a predefined border already with a title block, although the title blocks that we've been using lately have been missing the scale or the date. We need to add the scale and the date. So you should already have title blocks and borders set up in a drawing that exists. Just reuse it and create a new template one. I demonstrated once that I had a drawing that had like several different copies of the template sheet layer, and I would just reuse them and give them a new name, and I had several of them. So it's a think lazy, be productive method of reusing stuff you've already done. So except for the actual drawing of the flat and the dimensions of the flat, all that extraneous stuff that's on my list that should be on all drawings, like border and title block and stuff like that, you should already have in an existing file, right? If you're creating it from scratch, then we should chit-chat about becoming more efficient with reusing old stuff. Okay? Let me just see if that's everything that I wanted to share with you at the moment. I made a short list. Demo. Trace we did, creating construction drawing, double line tool, viewport, save, new sheet layers, label as needed, and so on and so forth. Yes, that's the demonstration for construction drawings. If you have any questions, I can elaborate. But otherwise...
Are you going to demonstrate a door, or do you just want us to follow the step? Because I know a door is a little different than that, because right here you put a bracing like this step up on, and...
That was an example. You don't have to do the door flap.
Okay.
Okay?
Do we do all of them or just one?
No, I think it was just one or two. I forget what the list said.
That's what I was gonna ask.
No, I need a sample that shows me that you can use all those tools that we've been going over, and I need you to include the fact that the framing is in a different class and it's got an attribute, and that the facing is in a different class and it has an attribute.
Showing that we are able to use all classes and layers.
Appropriately, yes. Okay, because if you can do one, I'm assuming you can do another. But we've been working up to this because the project that you did for today, which you're showing me good work, and if you're not quite ready to hand it in, that's fine. But in your when you're doing a flat, like a theatrical flat, Broadway flat, and forgive me, I know it bugs you when I say we've covered, but to remind you that the framing, the 1x3 framing should be in a class. The plywood, corner blocks, and keystones or straps should be in another class. So, and then the hardware should be in yet another class. So you're already demonstrating to me the repeatability of using it. Now we're doing practice and using new shapes and throwing in new tools. Okay? So I don't need 7 flats. I'm already looking that you can repeatedly do the classes and stuff, provided that you're maintaining your discipline and using the tools. Okay? So give me a really good flat. Quality, not quantity in this case, but we're practicing, sort of like rehearsal. Okay? Okay. If you have any questions, let me know.
And you can do this in VectorWorks, right?
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go take care of stuff in the shade.
Yeah, that's fine. What?
I was saying we can do VectorWorks, but I just want to do an AutoCAD project too.
Yes, you do have to do an AutoCAD project, and you're welcome to do this. You know what? All these things I've just shown you, you can do in either VectorWorks or AutoCAD. The only difference is that AutoCAD classes, VectorWorks classes are AutoCAD layers. That's really the fundamental difference between the two. So if you want to do this project in AutoCAD, that's fine, because it knocks out 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay?